And now this plenary session will consider the report on the work done by the General Committee with regard to the topics assigned to it. And at this point, I have the honor to offer the floor to the rapporteur from the General Committee, Mr. Nicolas Higuera, alternate representative of the delegation of Colombia, to hear the report. Mr. Rapporteur, you have the floor. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam President. As Rapporteur for the General Committee, I have the honor of presenting to the distinguished heads of delegation at this 58th special session of the General Assembly of the OAS the report on the work done by the General Committee pursuant to Article 25 of the Rules of Procedure. The plenary in its first session held Wednesday, October 15, 2025, installed the General Committee at 1:15, consistent with Article 22 of the Rules of Procedure and in accordance with the proposal of the President. Eric Luguyo was named the chair, and Janaya Station from the alternate representative of St. Lucia was elected as the vice chair. The President of the General Assembly invited the General Committee to present a report on its work during the second session of the plenary to be completed by 2 p.m. on October 15th. Also requested the measures to be taken to ensure that the deliberations were recorded and filed. The plenary assigned negotiation of those paragraphs which had not been concluded in the Permanent Council and which are part of the draft resolution. In its sole session held on October 15th, consistent with the order of the day, the General Committee considered the draft resolution of the organization's draft budget for 2026. As provided in Article 24 of the Rules of Procedure of the General Assembly, the committee proceeded to elect a rapporteur. The President gave my name, and I was chosen by acclamation. The committee considered the following paragraphs. In Section 1, Budget Appropriations, the chair asked the room if it agreed to add one paragraph referring to the Treasury Fund, which had accidentally been not included, explaining that this was a standard paragraph that was included in all previous negotiations on the program budget to ensure continuity of the General Secretariat's operations in addressing liquidity needs owing to insufficient payment of quotas. The paragraph was agreed by the General Committee and included as point 14, operative paragraph 14. On Section 3, Administrative and Budgetary Provisions, the chair reminded the room that there were 3 different proposals for paragraph 22. One presented by the delegation of the Bahamas with support of various delegations, another alternative proposed by the vice chair of the CAP, and lastly, an alternate proposal from the delegations of Jamaica and Canada. In the course of the deliberations, both the vice chair of the CAP and the delegations of Canada and Jamaica withdrew their proposals, leaving only the proposal put forward by the Bahamas. Antigua and Barbuda, Dominica, and Santa Lucia's delegations supported it. The delegations of Brazil, Chile, Mexico, Uruguay, and Paraguay, in turn, asked that this proposal be considered at a future date owing to the legal implications of the proposal and the limited time available for deliberation. At the request of Bahamas, the legal opinion of the Secretary of Legal Affairs was requested, as no agreement had been arrived at. The chair concluded the session deciding to elevate the draft resolution with only Bahamas' proposal to this session. We wish to highlight the excellent work of Eric Laguya and thank the member states for their dedication and commitment to completing this important work. Thank you to the members for their trust in me for serving as rapporteur. I also wish to express special thanks to the personnel of the Secretary or the General Secretariat for their dedication and professionalism, which are key factors in the success of our work. I have the honor at this time to submit this report to the delegations of this 58th special session of the General Assembly. Thank you very much.
Muchísimas gracias al señor.
Thank you to the rapporteur of the General Committee for presenting that report. I am certain that all of you will join us in expressing special thanks to the rapporteur, first of all, also the chair, the vice chair of the General Committee, Eric Luguia, alternate representative Canada, and Madam Soraya Stevenson, alternate representative, and thank you to Nicolas Higuera. Thank you to the entire General Committee, all the delegations who actively participated in this work. And we congratulate you and the Secretariat in dealing in such an excellent way with a complex matter. As indicated in the report, the plenary now is to take note of that report. There is no consensus yet as regards the proposed text, which now is 3.21 instead of 3.22, presented by the delegation of the Bahamas with the support of Antigua and Barbuda, St. Lucia, and Dominica. In this context, as indicated, delegations considered or requested whether the Bahamas would be willing to withdraw the proposal. I would like to give the floor to the delegation of the Bahamas to see if the position is the same or if there's any difference with respect to what we heard earlier.
Madam Chair, the Bahamas affirms the principle of legality as central to this organization. The OAS legal advisor has, by convolution, reaffirmed that our proposal does not contravene the Charter. Notably, the legal department has not cited one single provision of law that conflicts with our proposal. What we have heard were elaborations, not legally born nor legally assured elucidations. After exhaustive discussions over several months, and again today, it is evident that we face a political, not a legal impasse. In that context, and solely to avoid further procedural stagnation, the Bahamas will not object to the withdrawal of paragraph 22. Notwithstanding that it's the proposal from the Bahamas, there are also other supporting delegations. To be clear, this is in no manner an endorsement of the course taken. It is, however, a recognition that some member states presently lack the will and fortitude to advance accountability standards in the Organization of American States. The record should reflect that today's non-adoption is a matter of preference, not law, and certainly not principle. The Bahamas will not join consensus on any half measures that merely defer substantive reform. Thus, Chair, as a matter of comity, we will submit a footnote for inclusion in the text to thereby reaffirm our principled position. Thank you, Chair, and thank the Council for its kind attention.
Muchísimas gracias, señor.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for your position. We appreciate the option you are giving us with regard to the work of this Assembly. I'd like to open the forum to ask if any other delegations would like to speak to the issue and the words of Ambassador Namor. And I see that St. Lucia has requested the floor, and following St. Lucia, Antigua and Barbuda.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, my delegation aligns itself with the statement delivered by the delegation of the Bahamas. We will not join consensus on this matter, but we will not stand in the way. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias, señora.
Thank you very much to the alternate representative of St. Lucia. The floor now goes to Antigua and Barbuda.
Micrófono, embajador.
Thank you very much. Antigua and Barbuda fully endorses the position as articulated by Ambassador Nebor. We associated ourselves with the paragraph to begin with, and we continue to do so. We do not want withdrawal to be regarded as acquiescence in this matter. It is not over. It will come back. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. We will take due note of your remarks. The floor is open. In view of the fact that we see no more requests for the floor, I would like to express the chair's thanks for all the work done and expressed, and awaits the footnotes offered by the delegation of the Bahamas. We take note, and they will be reflected in the minutes, as well other interventions. And I now ask the delegations, now that this point of this agenda item has been resolved, can we consider adoption of the draft resolution for the organization's program budget for 2026? There being no requests for the floor nor objections, the draft resolution for the organization's program budget for 2026 is adopted.
Muchas gracias a las delegaciones.
Thank you to the delegations. Now I give the floor to the Ambassador of Antigua and Barbuda. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much. I regret that the Antigua and Barbuda delegation cannot join consensus on the 2026 program budget. That is why we have placed a full footnote of explanation on the record. Our decision is based on principle, not politics. We cannot endorse a process that leaves so little time for serious review. The CAP finished its deliberations less than 24 hours before this General Assembly meeting, giving capitals no meaningful opportunity to analyze, consult, or approve positions. This is not transparency or deliberation as the OAS Charter intended. More importantly, the budget ceiling before us, $92 million, is not realistic. It fails even to keep pace with inflation. 10 years ago, in 2016, the regular fund appropriation stood at about $84 million. If that figure had simply kept up with average inflation of roughly 2.8% per annum, today's ceiling should be close to $116 million. Instead, we are approving a smaller amount in real terms, less purchasing power, fewer staff, weaker programs, and slower delivery, while the organization's responsibilities have multiplied. This is not sustainability, it is slow attrition. At the same time, some members continue to accumulate large arrears, and yet they face no consequence. Others receive incentives for paying on time. Both practices must end. Membership must mean both rights and responsibilities. It cannot mean permanent privileges for non-peers. Right now, the only incentive to those who pay is not to pay, since they will lose absolutely nothing except to oversee the slow death of the Organization of American States. I must also address what my delegation views as accounting gymnastics, if not contrivance, in the treatment of the Venezuela quota. On paper, Venezuela is included in the total assessment of quotas as though it were contributing. But in practice, the spending plan before us has been reduced by the amount it knows Venezuela will not pay. That is the oddest kind of accounting I have ever seen in my life. So the organization counts income that never arrives and then cuts spending to match the absence. Who made and endorsed that decision is as yet unclear. My delegation was certainly not present when that decision was taken. Incidentally, I gather the quotas also dropped from 1.7 to 1.25 million for Venezuela. Again, I don't know how that decision was reached. And at some point, I hope that we will get a written explanation from whoever it was that made the decision. But I will be writing to the Secretariat for an explanation. The effective result of all of this is a smaller budget and less capacity to serve the people of the Americas. This distortion extends beyond finance to governance. Cuba and Venezuela, two countries that we don't invite to attend summits of the Americas and really have no place in here, continue to be treated as full members when we calculate the total membership to the mythical number of 34. That inflates the number of votes needed for decisions. Two non-participating, non-paying states thus raise the bar for everyone else, exercising a kind of silent veto over the decision-making of the organization. That is totally inequitable, it is illogical, and it is unsustainable. Antigua and Barbuda believes that this system, where non-payers are counted as full participants and their unpaid quotas silently shrink our budget, must be corrected. My delegation hopes that this is the last time that the General Assembly turns a blind eye to this blatant contradiction. If there is a need to change the Charter so that this can come to an end, then let us change the Charter. Stop hiding behind it. Antigua and Barbuda remains committed to this Organization of American States, to its potential, to what it can do if it is allowed to do it. We are committed to the values of democracy, human rights, security, and development that it represents. And we in the Caribbean, in CARICOM, uphold democracy and human rights to the fullest extent. We believe in this institution's potential to serve the people of the Americas, but we must give it the means to do so. We do not believe that this budget does that. Nonetheless, we pledge to continue to work with all member states to agree on a realistic budget, to uphold transparency, to modernize the quota system, and to ensure that our votes and our finances reflect the true membership of this organization. That is how we can build a stronger, fairer, and more credible OAS, one capable of meeting the real challenges of our time. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, señor embajador.
Thank you, Ambassador. Bahamas, Ambassador Namor, you now have the floor.
All. The Bahamas acknowledges those responsible for preparing the 2026 program budget. Regrettably, Chair, we, the member states, are rapidly micromanaging the General Secretariat, while the Secretariat in turn readily mismanages critical opportunities. Budget formulation has devolved into an ad hoc, politically driven exercise that replicates outdated frameworks and overlays selective priorities. Deliberations center not on outcomes or efficiency, but on posts, personalities, and institutional pillage. What we have before us is not a budget in its truest sense. It is a list of appropriations, a might is right compilation reflecting the overreach of CAP, an advisory body that has become an instructive one. The document lacks technical rigor. It is not transformative. It is transactional, revealing a persistent misalignment between structure, mandate, and resources. This zero nominal growth proposal imposes material cuts on an already hollowed-out organization, eroding core capacity and institutional memory while perpetuating an austerity cycle that prizes arithmetic over ambition and contraction over capacity. Chair, aside from the appointment of an executive director, the salient recommendations of the A&M report and other mandated assessments remain unimplemented. These could yield between $4 and $7 million annually in efficiency gains and provide a sound, data-driven foundation for sustainable management. The organization must now move beyond arithmetics and political convenience. While the OAS is not a corporation, neither is it a charity. Quotas must be paid in full and on time, and the same rigor and discipline and accountability expected of responsible institutions must also apply here at the OAS. The Bahamas continues to advocate for structured evidence-based fiscal discipline through zero-based budgeting, activity-based costing, results-based management, and competency-focused hiring. Properly applied, these tools could yield $6 to $11 million annually in efficiencies, enabling deficit correction, modernization, and reinvestment in staff and infrastructure without compromising integrity. We again call for a consolidated budget, linking regular and specific funds with clear cost attribution. Previously, the Bahamas identified potential savings between $2 and $3 million through structural realignment, advice that was ignored. We now identify additional opportunities worth several million more. Let me be clear, the Bahamas acts on principle and in good faith. Our interventions should not be misconstrued as obstruction, but as constructive critique, because to ignore them is to miss both the message and the opportunity. No budget would satisfy all, but it should at least reflect an earnest effort to do so. Chair, the Bahamas offers the following technical advice. 1, address fiscal distortions. Reconcile incompatible quota inclusions for Venezuela and Cuba, and correct imbalances created by the prompt payment discount, the absence of penalties, and the permanent earmarking of staff positions. 2, adopt consolidated evidence-based budgeting and a strategic plan grounded in recognized financial management methodologies. 3, implement the salient A&M recommendations and other mandated reviews to realize tangible savings while protecting regional development and capacity building. 4, engage member states consistently, speaking with us, not at us, and listening to all, not only a privileged few. Most importantly, engagement must not only occur in moments of need or convenience or advantage. Chair, this advice is free, but as we all know, the cost will come from the action we take or we fail to take. The Bahamas remains steadfast in its commitment to this organization and stands ready to render its full support. Chair, we thank you, and we thank the Assembly for its kind attention.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. And I wanted to ask to circulate the speeches so that we can take note of these in written form so we can include these in our minutes. Thank you. Ambassador Belloni. Thank you very much, Chair. I want to thank you for your work as President of the GEA and as Chair of the Permanent Council. I also want to thank the Vice Chairs and the other participants in the long negotiations of CAP. I just wanted to highlight a few points, if you will allow me. The fact that we were able to adopt this draft resolution after such lengthy debate and negotiations shows that the multilateral spirit prevailed. And that means that we have flexibility in our negotiations for the sake of reaching a compromise. That means that we didn't just repeat our entrenched
positions. And I appreciate that flexibility prevailed and that we were able to reach a consensus, although I know some delegations are not happy with the outcome, although I think this is part and parcel of a negotiation process. I also wanted to say, Chair, when we speak about multilateralism, well, it's easy to talk about it and have the beautiful sentences in reference to it, but we need to actually implement it in practice because we need to respect timeframes and that resources that this organization needs, that we need for the General Secretariat and other areas be used in a results-based manner. This means we have to make an effort to avoid accusations. I understand that the negotiations ended very late last night, but I believe that this has happened before many General Assemblies. Of course, it's nice to be able to finish early before a resolution is adopted, but I know that many times we've had to do this. And nonetheless, we were able to, for example, close the resolution. It's nothing new, but I've never actually heard this statement that there wasn't enough time to consider the draft resolution because we ended so late the night before. I am asking that everyone engage fully with the deliberations, and I know everyone did actually, but we are trying to reach a consensus, and I know we tried to reach a consensus 24 hours before, but I believe that our lengthy debate was legitimate, that we needed to really try to come to an agreement about the arrears and the prompt payment, and I think it's legitimate to even, put on the table the need to reform the charter or to correct, for example, quotas. All systems need to be reformed at times, and we need to debate and negotiate. Sometimes we need to really delve into an issue, and we have legal affairs with us to help us. Thank you. Giving their opinion.
Muchísimas gracias, señor.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for your intervention. I'd like to give the floor to Barbados. Ambassador Fernandes, you have the floor.
President, heads of delegation, Secretary General, Assistant Secretary General, alternates and delegates, permanent observers. Today, I take the floor to address this special session of the General Assembly convened at a time when the Organization of American States faces not just a fiscal reckoning, but an existential challenge: how to remain true to its founding mission while navigating the pressures of scarce resources amidst competing priorities. Let us be clear. The financial constraints under which the OAS now operates may not be new, but what is elusively clear is that the financial constraints are becoming increasingly burdensome. The task, therefore, before us is not simply to approve a budget, for that effort in itself, as challenging as it may be, may prove to be easier to attain than renewing our shared commitment to this hemispheric institution and to what it stands for. Our task here today should not be one to manage decline, but to chart renewal. President, in recent years, the interwoven crises of climate change, inequality, governance deficits, and new threats to democratic order have revealed that we cannot afford a minimalist multilateralism, one that is funded to the point of mere survival. If we are committed to development, democracy, human rights, and multidimensional security, then we must be equally serious about financing them. The OAS must be empowered, not encumbered, in order to fulfill its mandate. In addition, we must reject the notion that the value of this organization is in what it costs. Its value lies in what it enables: dialogue over division, cooperation over conflict, and a common agenda for the progress of our peoples. Excellencies, in reimagining the budget, we must do more than balance the books. We must balance the voices, not silence them, but balance them. A revitalized OAS must reflect the aspirations of all its members, not the agendas of some. Small states, vulnerable states, and those on the margins must not be asked to bear disproportionate burdens, neither accept diminished roles. While budget approval creates a framework for spending within predetermined limits, helping to manage resources effectively and avoid fiscal shortfalls, it must not be devoid of purpose linked to a clear mission. While the budget assigns responsibility for adherence to specific heads and line items, which in turn must justify financial decisions and operations, it must ensure that spending is aligned with the organization's overall goals and priorities by establishing clear funding levels for different areas that impact all member states. Indeed, there is no true hemispheric vision unless it is inclusive. There is no shared destiny unless it is co-authored. And there is no enduring peace or prosperity unless it is rooted in justice and equality for all of our peoples. President, it is once said that institutions are only as strong as the trust we placed in them and the support we are willing to give. The time has come for this General Assembly to recommit to an OAS that is fit for purpose, not only in structure, but in spirit. Let us therefore approach this budget not as a ledger of limitations, but as a blueprint for renewal. Let it provide the means for the OAS to invest in its core pillars, in strengthening democratic institutions, in protecting human rights, in advancing sustainable development, and in securing the safety and dignity of our citizens. A revitalized OAS is therefore not a luxury, it is a necessity. It is in collective interest, our collective interest of all members to ensure that this institution does not merely survive, but thrives. In closing, let us remind ourselves that history will not judge us by the economy of our expenditures, but by the breadth of our ambition and the depth of our solidarity and collective efforts. Let us move forward, united in purpose, equitable in voice, and committed in action to build an OAS that truly serves all of the peoples of the Americas. I thank you.
Muchas gracias, embajador, por sus...
Thank you, Ambassador, for your inspiring words. And Ambassador Baños from Mexico has the floor. Thank you, President. The delegation of Mexico welcomes the approval by this special General Assembly of the 2026 OAS program budget. We sincerely acknowledge the work of President Alejandra Solano. We thank her for her leadership, and we also thank our colleagues from Canada and from Colombia, as well as the technical secretary of CAP. We appreciate the fact that open negotiations have prevailed in the multilateral work we do. We affirm our commitment to a sustainable, transparent, and efficient OAS that is results-oriented. The idea of having a 92 million ceiling consolidates the principle of nominal growth zero, which we have supported from the get-go. We believe that this agreement strengthens predictability, sustainability of operations, among others. We recognize that we are moving towards a more orderly administrative structure under the leadership of Secretary General Albert Ramdin, who we fully support, and we believe that during his term there will be good use of resources that will translate into tangible outcomes for all inhabitants in our hemisphere, and that our policies will be human-centered. We have a limit of 14 trust positions, and this includes the special envoy to Haiti, which strengthens the roadmap together with CARICOM and UN efforts. This reaffirms the commitment of the OAS to our brother country and also the neutrality with respect to the General Secretariat with responsible technical policies in keeping with sovereignty and respect for international law. Mexico appreciates the integral conservation of resources that have been allocated to the Inter-American Court. This is a jurisdictional body. We appreciate that the IACHR has retained its capacity and that SIM also conserves a structure with personnel. And also we have Ms. Sekefi in operation. Based on Mexico's proposal, we believe that the ombudsperson must be neutral and accessible, and will also provide protection to all staff. This in keeping with a commitment to have a respectful and safe working place at this organization. Mexico is thrilled to see that, based on our position, that the Inter-American Juridical Committee has now a regular fund position, this in keeping with the resolution on international law, which also strengthens the progressive nature of inter-American law, which is a building block for our principles. Mexico wants a rules-based and cooperation-based multilateral structure. This consolidates our institutional efforts, which have taken place for the last 5 years, which have been supported by Mexico, and this helps us also conserve the successes of the 55th GA. We do have to address our new mandates and execute the existing mandates without compromising our financial stability. Mexico appreciates that we have the return to office for our staff. This will contribute to normalizing institutional tasks after a long period of remote work because of the pandemic that began in 2020. We would call upon everyone to use resources in an efficient way. Mexico also would support the vision of Secretary General Ramdin of an OAS that is modern and close to its inhabitants and a good use of resources that our taxpayers are actually paying. We support the SG, and we believe that the General Secretariat needs to revise the management of human resources to be able to redirect budget or personnel to different areas that need it. We also want to have efficient structures, and this is also true out of our headquarters, that perhaps we would have staff that needs to go to national offices or to our member states, because we believe this could be more efficient. The approval of the program budget for 2026 reaffirms the collective commitment to financial responsibility, institutional transparency, and operational sustainability of the OAS, and strengthens the foundation for a more effective, responsible organization that is human-oriented. We will continue to cooperate with other delegations so that we have an OAS which is more disciplined with its resources and that is accountable and is giving us great successes at a multilateral level. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ambassador. And now I'd like to give the floor to Ambassador Arce from Bolivia. Thank you very much, Chair. I'd like to begin by congratulating you, especially not only for your wonderful stewardship, but also for having been so successful at the head of the negotiations of this program budget. The plurinational state of Bolivia, as a member state of the OAS, warmly welcomes the approval of the 2026 program budget. We would like to thank the General Secretariat and also the CAP for the efforts made to prepare this and to try to maintain the operational viability of the organization in a very difficult environment because of the economic and political challenges we face. We especially appreciate the austerity, the effectiveness, and transparency which are reflected in the budget that has been approved. We also appreciate what the Secretary General has done, and we appreciate what member states have done to address this budget and the budget issues. And we know that we have been very respectful with each other despite any discrepancies. We highlight the joint work that has allowed us to be very transparent about the adoption of the budget and the accountability which this administration is committed to. It is essential to ensure that all contributions of member states are used in a more prudent and effective way. Only in this way can we overcome the errors of the past, and we hope that in the future we will have more staff and more budget to be able to expand the organization in the future. We all dream of this. We all dream of the evolution of humanity, and we should not be the exception. The budget should be a tool which reflects the strategic priorities that we all agree upon, and in that sense, we celebrate the continuity of financing of the four pillars of the organization: democracy, human rights, multilateral security, and integral development. And in this framework, we recognize specific issues that are important and already identified by member states within the competency of the OAS. For example, the situation and crisis in Haiti, where we need to take immediate action. These actions are being implemented for the good of this country. At the same time, we highlight the mandate of the OAS to continue to gather external resources so that the mandates can be implemented, always highlighting the importance of vulnerable sectors, women, and human rights. And we appreciate, Chair, that we have been able to maintain the budget foreseen for the ISCHR and, above all, the Inter-American Court of Human Rights. We also emphatically appreciate that we have been able to have a return to office. All staff are coming back, and we think that several positions which had CPRs are now being financed by the regular fund based on the TRIBAD opinions, and we appreciate this. Bolivia reiterates that at this point we need to focus our efforts on concrete programs which address social exclusion and poverty. We need to prioritize key areas for integral development, education, science, technology, and the fight against climate change, especially in benefit of countries that have vulnerable economies. Solidarity and cooperation should not be a footnote. It should be a pillar that guides everything we do. Bolivia, beyond political changes, will always insist on the non-intervention principle in the internal affairs of other states and in the self-determination of peoples, because this is necessary for our harmonious coexistence. We need to strengthen our institutions and democracy, and we need to fully respect human rights. Only under the framework of sovereignty and consent of states. In that sense, we appreciate that the 2026 program budget is a reflection of the commitment of all of us to an OAS that promotes development of social justice and respects diversity. We support the adoption of the program budget 2026, the first presented by our new Secretary General, which is committed to austerity, transparency, and we hope that this will also always comply with the charter and the purposes of this organization. Thank you so much.
Gracias a usted, embajador. Tiene la
Thank you, Ambassador. Ambassador Cordero from the Dominican Republic. Thank you very much, Chair. The delegation of the Dominican Republic is thrilled to see the adoption of the 2026 program budget. We want to thank the Secretary General, Ambassador Ramdin, for the efforts to present in a very short time a draft resolution for the budget, which is oriented to keeping implementation of all mandates and also something that is in line with the financial reality of our organization. We also recognize the leadership of Ambassador Solano as the chair of CAP and as the president of this General Assembly. We also want to recognize the Secretariat of CAP. We want to recognize Canada and Colombia. For example, Mr. Higuera, we thank you for your efforts. The Dominican Republic especially appreciates the priority placed by the 2026 program budget and the Secretary General's attention to the crisis in Haiti. And we believe that we have the tools to move forward to implement the roadmap to support stability and peace in Haiti. However, we are concerned that once again, the budget continues to just cover administrative and personnel costs, where essential areas like democracy, human rights, and security, as well as integral development, are affected by budget cuts and the lack of sufficient resources to execute their programs, despite the direct impact that these have in our countries. And in that sense, we appreciate voluntary contributions of member states, permanent observer nations, and other entities which complement the financing of these areas. We reiterate that the essential functions of the organization should be supported by a stable and sustainable regular fund. The execution of priority mandates should be at the foundation of our mandates. We understand that member states have cooperated to maintain operations of the OAS in a context of limited resources and growing economic uncertainty. In this framework, we believe it is indispensable to prioritize important mandates, revising existing programs to see if they are still impactful so that resources are used effectively, avoiding fragmentation of our budget and strengthening our capacity for institutional compliance to have a more targeted and responsible use of our budget. Similarly, we appreciate efforts to have interinstitutional communication and to have external resources coming in. We want the OAS to generate new partnerships to finance its programs. We reiterate the importance of consolidating a transparency culture, of accountability, of responsibility and management. And to this end, we welcome the provisions of the 2026 program budget, which instruct the General Secretariat to present periodical reports, do audits and technical evaluations to look closely at financial and administrative mechanisms, and that includes implementation of OAS Core, the ICR, among others. These instruments, together with workforce audits and performance evaluations, are key to improve efficiency, institutional responsibility, and trust of member states in the administration of resources. We expect to have progress made in geographic balance. We want a more diverse workforce here. This effort reflects a principle of justice which also enriches the OAS to reflect the cultural diversity of our region. We recognize that there are many challenges that persist in the organization and limited resources to address them, but we encourage the General Secretariat to continue on with the 2026-2030 strategic plan and to continue to execute the physical asset strategy so that they are transparent and solid in keeping with efficiency and the principle of optimizing expenses. We believe that the program budget that, although limited in some ways, is an effective tool to consolidate trust among member states, to modernize institutional management, and respond in a timely way to political, social, and economic challenges in our region. Thank you very much.
Gracias a usted, embajadora, por sus palabras.
Thank you, Ambassador, for those remarks. Ambassador Lanza from Uruguay is recognized. Thank you, Chair. The delegation of Uruguay welcomes the adoption of the resolution. Congratulations to Alejandra Solano for her chairship of the CAP. Thank you to the General Secretariat for its dedicated work and the work of all the delegations. We back a transition budget that ensures institutional continuity between two administrations and at the same time reserves the organization's finances. This budget is central to upholding the main mandates of organization and addresses the budget restrictions faced in the region. The organization cannot be removed from the reality lived by our organizations. There is dissatisfaction, but we have addressed the concerns in collaboration with the General Secretariat. We applaud the fiscal responsibility and allocation of resources, and we underscore that the principles of austerity, transparency, and access to information in evaluating performance and decisions are good governance standards that we must continue to follow. We consider it vital to not undermine the human rights pillar and therefore work with several states to ensure that the Inter-American Human Rights Courts would not be affected by any cuts applied. We highlight the importance of the positions and the commission and the importance of upholding the Inter-American Human Rights system. We also highlight the importance of the Inter-American Institute of the Child, keeping its budget intact so that the staff could be kept on board. We are thankful for the support in this regard and are thankful for the proposal from Uruguay and other states to initiate a process enabling financing from the regular fund starting in 2027. The salaries of the special rapporteurships in the commission, ensuring their functional independence. As to the Commission of Women and Ms. Sevi, we value the system for Paraguay. It's vital to keep the SIMS capacity so it can continue to work for the advancements of women in the region. And the strengthening of Ms. Sigmi is important in fighting all types of gender-based violence in our hemisphere. In this budget, we also wish to expressly back the Secretary General in beginning a new term at the helm of the organization. As Haiti should remain at the center of the agenda under a new mandate under the United Nations. There's an opportunity to deploy our capacities through coordination at a regional level. The request from the Secretary General for the Haiti roadmap is vital for democratization in that area. It deserves our organization's attention. We highlight the return to office, also noted in this resolution. There have been complex issues for the organizations such as the IADB, the Casa del Soldado, and the residence of the Secretary General. We back initial work of the Governance Committee and the Capital Fund and administering resources from those sources, regulating their use and ensuring good practices as regards housing subsidies and other related matters. As to CPR staff, we urge caution regarding these matters and making sure that all positions are competitive. To close, Uruguay sustains that multilateralism amidst clear rules and good faith is the best way to protect national, regional, and global interests. Our populations demand that we act prudently, and with this program budget, we are taking the steps to help the organization address the issues affecting our hemisphere. Thank you.
Embajador, tiene la palabra el señor embajador.
Thank you. Ambassador Cherniak from Argentina has the floor. Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to applaud the fact that we're able to adopt the 2026 program budget. This was achieved through joint efforts amongst all the delegations, and we must recognize your leadership, which was very professional and displayed great patience. This is a virtue that is necessary in leading such a complex process. This budget, aligned with the principles of austerity and financial sustainability of the organization, will make it possible to continue the organization's activities with its own resources by using those resources efficiently. At the same time, priorities of the Secretary General were incorporated in order to address the challenges faced by the new administration. This involves creating a position to following up on the Haiti roadmap and securing funds for that purpose. It also strengthens press, communications, and external relations. These are vital to better position the OAS and raise its profile. It continues the physical assets strategy for purposes of optimizing the use of the organization's properties and ensuring that revenue from sales of property will go to the capital fund and the physical asset strategy, ensuring preservation and reinvestment thereof. It continues also to modernize translation and interpretation systems, evaluating the incorporation of technology to make those services more financially efficient. Madam President, that wraps up the diplomatic message. And what I will say now continues to be diplomatic, but maybe not as diplomatic as the first part. 2 points. First, regarding the legality of the process in which my delegation took part. I specifically, because I attended most of the CAP meetings, would never have participated in an illegal, illegitimate, non-transparent process, would have supported a process that wasn't legal, transparent, and legitimate. Consequently, from our perspective, the process was lawful, legitimate, and transparent. Second point, to apply penalties for issues that member states may face in paying their quotas would, from our perspective, require an amendment of the charter. My legal interpretation, and it's not mine alone, and I don't wish to make it seem as though we were trying to hide behind a legal umbrella. I just wish to state plainly that we are entirely willing, should there be consensus, to open up the OAS charter and to discuss everything, not just this point, all of it. Because many times when such debates arise, it's as though we were opening Pandora's box. But if there's will to open the box, the Argentinian delegation will not throw up any barriers against that. We are entirely open to doing so at whatever time seems appropriate. Now, returning to the more diplomatic part of this, though we wish to be clear and honest, in the negotiation process, Argentina always sought to play a productive role, be transparent, and address the concerns of all nations and regions, and we will continue to work in this manner, shoulder to shoulder with our brothers and sisters in this organization, knowing that today the priority right now was to provide the new Secretary General, the first Secretary General from the Caribbean, with the instruments he needed to initiate his term. And it is difficult to begin one's role and term without a consensus budget, and he deserved that. And what we did was to clearly make it a priority to provide him with such an instrument. And that's what it is. It's an instrument, it's not set in stone, and we can certainly improve it, correct it after the first year, and we'll have lessons learned with regard to the outcomes of what was negotiated. As in any negotiation, as we've said on other occasions, the outcomes should leave everybody partially unsatisfied. That's a compromise, because we are prioritizing is having achieved a common goal. Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador, for those remarks.
Anderson de Jamaica.
Thank you, Madam President. The delegation of Jamaica is pleased to participate in this 55th special session of the General Assembly, convened to consider and adopt the Program Budget 2026 of the Organization of American States. Please allow me to thank the Chair of the Committee on Administrative and Budgetary Affairs for her stewardship over the past several weeks and her hard work. We also extend appreciation to Secretary General Ramdin, Assistant Secretary General Hill, the Department of Budget and Administration for their valuable expertise and consistent support and guidance provided throughout the process, and to all member states that participated actively and constructively in the consultations. Over the past several weeks, we have engaged in robust, constructive, and at times challenging discussions. These exchanges reflect our shared commitment to ensuring that we can achieve a budget that reflects the priorities of all member states and that equips the organization to meet the challenges ahead. More importantly, that the organization remains effective, efficient, and responsive to the needs of our people. Madam President, the deliberations on the program budget have also underscored the complex balance required to maintain the financial health of the organization while enabling it to fulfill the broad and ambitious mandate. As we finalize the Program Budget 2026, my delegation recognizes the ongoing financial challenges facing the organization. Chief among these is the persistent issue of outstanding quota contributions, which continues to affect the organization's ability to implement its mandate fully and efficiently. Therefore, while we rightly demand prudent financial management and accountability from the Secretary General, we must ensure he has the resources and latitude to enable his work. In this regard, we encourage member states to make every effort to meet their financial obligations to the organization in a timely manner through the payment of assessed quota contributions. We can all agree that predictable, and adequate financing is indispensable for the proper functioning and sustainability of the organization and for the delivery of its mandates across its 4 pillars: democracy, human rights, multidimensional security, and integral development. My delegation urges that measures be implemented in keeping with Article 120 of our Charter to promote as wide a geographic representation of member states within the workforce as possible. This is not only a matter of principle, but also one that enriches the perspectives and collective ownership that are essential to the strength and legitimacy of the organization. My delegation commends the efforts made to include within the budget the provision for the appointment of a special representative for Haiti, which reflects the collective recognition of the urgent need to address the security situation facing the people of Haiti. Madam President, we have taken note of the commitments given by the Secretary General and the Assistant Secretary General indicating their intention to strengthen the structure of the organization, enhance efficiency, and safeguard staff welfare. My delegation believes that a well-supported and motivated staff is essential to the success of the organization. I wish to reaffirm Jamaica's commitment to working collaboratively with all member states to ensure that the OAS remains a strong, responsive, and financially stable institution, one capable of advancing the shared aspirations, economic development, and prosperity of our hemisphere. Mr. President, I thank you.
Thank you, Anderson, and I give the floor to, le doy la palabra a Costa Rica.
Good afternoon, Madam President, Secretary General, Assistant Secretary General, distinguished delegations. Costa Rica expresses its satisfaction with the agreements arrived at regarding the 2026 program budget. A budget which, as we have reiterated throughout, was seeking zero growth in adherence with the decisions of Antigua and Barbuda and the political mandate for sustainability that we as member states have collectively assumed. We are pleased to see that the approved text fulfills that principle. It does not increase quotas, maintains proportionality in the use of resources, and introduces efficiency and transparency measures that will continue to improve the organization's financial health. This is a responsible step that balances austerity with institutional stability. My delegation wishes to highlight the importance of continuing to explore innovative ways to strengthen the capacities of the institution without raising costs. In that regard, we are happy to see the drive towards service centers in the region as an efficient way to provide technical administrative support from the OAS. This modality is a cost-effective alternative that helps to modernize institutional management at the time that it preserves fiscal discipline and the highest professional standards. Costa Rica also wishes to state that we very much value that there have been no cuts to the Inter-American Human Rights Court in San Jose, with its commitment to the rule of law, justice, and fundamental rights. The court is an autonomous organ of the Inter-American system that fulfills a vital mandate and should not be affected by sweeping austerity measures. So we celebrate that the particular situation of this body was recognized and that many states called for keeping its resources whole. We also recognize the efforts to maintain resources allocated to the Inter-American Institute of the Child to honor its previous obligations, as well as the scholarships program and CD pillars that reflect the commitment of this organization to education and cooperation. Costa Rica also wishes to express appreciation that the budget preserves resources for CETEL, which will enable continuity of its valuable technical assistance, connectivity, and digital transformation agenda. This is vital given the 9th regular session of the CITEL Assembly to be held in March 2026 in Costa Rica. This will be a key space for reaffirming hemispheric commitments in the area of telecommunications, innovation, and equitable access to technology. We appreciate that the 2026 budget acknowledges the importance of ensuring full operation of CETEL in the context of an interconnected modern OAS. Lastly, we are pleased that the Secretary of the Inter-American Juridical Committee has a regular position based on the commitments assumed by the member states. This reflects collective effort to strengthen the committee and ensure technical administrative continuity, which is vital to the development of inter-American rights. We are moving towards a system that's more robust and sustainable, capable of more effectively addressing legal and regulatory challenges across our region. Costa Rica fully backs the vision to strengthen the physical health of the OAS as long as its substantive role and credibility are supported. Fiscal responsibility and human vision, this is what is best for the people of the Americas. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ambassador, for your remarks. The Ambassador of Paraguay has the floor. Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to congratulate you for your excellent stewardship throughout this assembly and at the helm of the CAP in the recent months. Thank you very much for that. My delegation celebrates the approval of the 2026 program budget for the OAS, even though it did not receive unanimous support from all member states. Still, we respectfully appreciate the flexibility of the delegations and acknowledge the importance of continuing to deliberate on points of dissension. This has all been the result of an arduous but exemplary negotiation process characterized by transparency, openness, and mutual respect, in which each member state had a voice and brought constructive spirit. Despite our differences, we have worked together respectfully to arrive at a notable outcome that we can define as prudent, realistic, and profoundly coherent. Prudent because we've honored fiscal responsibility, making sure that our expenses fall within the limits of our available resources. In essence, we've created a budget that is financially responsible and sustainable. It's realistic because it has been developed sensitive to the realities and the ability of our member states to contribute. And it's coherent because it has sensibly allocated the needed financing to enable the secretariats and principal bodies of the OAS to fulfill their mandates in the areas of democracy, human rights, integral development, and multidimensional security. Madam President, we recognize the efforts of the General Secretary to ensure cross-cutting savings across the organization. We know that this has required sacrifice and flexibility in many areas, but these steps are necessary at a time when all our countries are encountering internal fiscal constraints. We value the decision to preserve the budget allocated to the Inter-American Human Rights Courts and the Inter-American Institute of the Child. Likewise, we are pleased that we have kept our obligations to the Inter-American Defense Board, allocating the funds for maintenance of the Casa del Soldado. This reflects not only the flexibility and goodwill of all the delegations and the General Secretariat, but they're a clear sign of the integrity and seriousness with which we assume obligations to sustain the noble mission of our organization. We are fully aware that we arrived at what was possible given all the positions of the delegations. This balance that we struck must be valued as such. Nevertheless, we know that there are still essential debates pending, among them how we can more effectively ensure that the member states pay their quotas on time, respecting the provisions of our charter. Paraguay is committed to that dialogue with the conviction that the OAS's financial stability is the key to its future. Nevertheless, we do wish that this debate is given sufficient time, given the nature thereof. Madam President, with the recent approval of the new structure of the General Secretariat and now with the adoption of this budget, Paraguay believes that the transition period has been successfully completed, and we now have the administrative and budgetary tools needed for the organization to proceed with efficiency as a guiding principle, along with transparency, accountability, and caution in the spending of its resources. This will enhance mutual trust amongst member states, which is vital to sustain the work that we do and reinforce the relevance of regional multilateralism as a collective imperative. Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador, for those remarks. We now give the floor to Ambassador Monica Valencia of Ecuador. I believe today is a happy day. I want us to look at each other and realize we did it. We achieved the 2026 program budget, and it's a historic lesson. We know that when you can't achieve what you want, you have to want what you could achieve. Madam President, everyone who's present here or attending remotely, on behalf of the Republic of Ecuador, I'm speaking up to celebrate and express appreciation for the approval of the 2026 program budget. We wanted a lot. We wanted, first of all, to have a budget in line with commitments to the organization's missions, but then we had to face reality. We had to be realistic about what our states could afford, and yet support management in policy, strategy, and operationally. To speak of the budget at the current time, that is to go beyond mere figures and talk about social commitment and have a political vision regarding what we are seeking to build overall without ignoring individual interests of states, but highlighting those broader interests and the interests of the most vulnerable and excluded in the hemisphere. We must reflect. For the Republic of Ecuador, any exercise around budgetary approval of an international organization must involve reflection on cost-benefit ratios that cannot be seen exclusively in monetary terms, however, but also political terms, and must accompanied by plans that foster inclusion, multilateral impact, and defense of the highest values, including freedom and democracy. Supporting the management of mandates of the OAS for Ecuador is a principle to be observed, and given the existence of limited resources, it's important to prioritize and align. And it is for that reason that we welcome the fact that analysis and decision-making was based on universality, clarity, transcendence, specificity, possibility, austerity, and openness. The principle of equity is also vital in managing budgetary matters. Here, we agree with Barbados when it says that there is no hemispheric vision without an inclusive vision. To be committed to the OAS, what must be and what must be in the current context, that is imperative. The Organization of American States must reflect sustained growth, strengthening of democracy and peace, and therefore accountability and streamlining of mandates are minimum to ensure the organization's survival and to quickly find efficiencies in conducting and executing those mandates. Thanks are in order. Thanks for, and we've, for the recognition that we must review everything we do, adhere to the principles of construction of international community based on principles of non-intervention in internal matters, peaceful resolution of conflicts, and self-determination of peoples. It's also built on cooperation, good faith, and prohibition of the use of threats of force. When we cannot achieve what we want what we can achieve. The Republic of Ecuador clearly supports what has been adopted with a view to having a greater presence of the OAS in matters of vital interest, such as the matter of Haiti. Thank you to Canada and the United States, because it is thanks to their decision to provide support that in 2022 they supported more than, or provided more than 60% of the funds. We needed that support to ensure a good impact across the hemisphere by an organization that takes concrete, effective steps, always committed to integration. Ecuador salutes the mission of the Secretary General and Assistant Secretary General in allocating resources to what is most important. Welcome the process of negotiation that led to this point, and are grateful for the support given to the vital organs of the organization, particularly in the matter of human rights. We thank the whole CAP team and reiterate one last time, when you can't achieve what you want, you must want what you can achieve, yet never fail to keep fighting. Thank you, Ambassador Palencia. We now hear from Ambassador Pascual, the chair of the CAP.
Thank you very much, Secretary General, Assistant Secretary General, distinguished colleagues. Chile wants to recognize the efforts of the President, the work of Costa Rica, Ambassador Solano and her team, and everyone who made this agreement possible. It has not been an easy process, but it shows that when there is a will, there is a way. What is the best budget for the OAS? There is a phrase, and the ambassador of Argentina said it, and it's always around the budget discussion. A good budget is one that doesn't leave everyone happy. Beyond it being a cliche, it means that a good budget means there are clear priorities, real limits, and difficult decisions. Sometimes that hurts. We believe there was a genuine effort to have a budget that reflects the strategy and financial health of the organization, where every dollar corresponds to a priority and based on verifiable data, not wishes, and shows transparency and responsibility. In this sense, we want to thank member states for their flexibility, and we support the Secretary General and his team, especially flexibility to not compromise the Inter-American Court and the Inter-American system of human rights as a whole. We also celebrate the strategic vision of supporting this budget, and by emphasizing communication, which means we can show everyone the good work we do, and which means we are being close to people and talking to them directly about how we impact their lives. We appreciate that most member states supported the budget to be able to implement the roadmap in Haiti, which we know is a hemispheric priority and is evidence of our ability to respond to crises. We are aware that the OAS is in a critical financial situation and that trust in multilateralism is stretched. Our people expect tangible results. We must have effective institutions. We must use their resources widely. Let me give you an example. 2 days ago in my country, during the National Meeting of Businesses, which is a large annual conference, the most applauded person was our Comptroller General. Where she called for accountability and control, and she was welcomed enthusiastically. This means that citizens want institutions who manage public resources responsibly. So shared responsibility corresponds to the Secretary General, who needs to be transparent and austere with resources. Member states need to contribute to their responsibility. They need to act coherently in keeping with mandates. Only that way we'll have a legitimate, sustainable, and relevant OAS. President, we believe we are at an inflection point. This is an opportunity to be innovative and recover trust, like the UN, which is commemorating this year its 80th anniversary by promoting the UN 80 initiative. We need also to revitalize our institutions, to optimize and modernize our institutions, given growing challenges. In 2028, we will be 80 years old. We need to have a capable OAS that can respond to the challenges of our time. To modernize the OAS, it is not an option, it is an imperative, and we will be here to accompany that effort. Thank you very much, Ambassador Pascual. The alternate representative of Panama has the floor, Silvia Venegas. Thank you very much, President, Chair. Good afternoon, Excellencies, Secretary General Albert Ramdin, Assistant Secretary General Laura Gil, permanent representatives, alternate representatives, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Republic of Panama, it is an honor to greet you and express the commitment of our country to an Organization of American States that is guided by principles of austerity, transparency, effectiveness, and financial responsibility. We have met today to consider and approve the 2026 program budget of the OAS, the result of a technical process led up by CAB and an outcome of engaged dialogue between member states and the Secretary General. We would like to recognize the chair of CAB, Ambassador Solano, for leading this complex and difficult process, and thank the Secretary General for his efforts to present a draft of a program budget with conciliated demands for budget with the limits we have, looking for institutional sustainability and austerity. We reiterate our position that institutional sustainability should not be achieved by increasing quotas, rather by efficient, predictable, and results-based management. Every dollar in resources should be connected to a mandate that we have approved and should look for measurable results. In that sense, we support the implementation of quarterly execution reports, optimization of the ICR, and strengthening of internal controls and independent audits. At the same time, the government of Panama believes it is essential that savings measures need to be taken. This needs to be the raison d'etre for democracy, integral development, human rights, among others. The 4 pillars are independent and should have balanced resources. We support evidence-based management, and we need to have an assessment also of long-term contracts and CPRs so we can have institutional functionality without new permanent financial commitments. At the same time, we underscore the importance to have an ongoing dialogue about mechanisms which foster timely payments. So we have equitable treatment of all member states. The 2026 program budget represents a step towards a transparent and sustainable OAS. Its adoption shows our collective commitment to efficiency and fiscal responsibility, but at the same time, the political importance of our organization in the hemisphere. We reaffirm our willingness to continue to work to have an OAS which manages its resources rigorously, which is committed to transparency, and which is a forum for dialogue and understanding between the peoples of the Americas. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Panama. The alternate representative of Guatemala has the floor. Thank you very much, Chair. The delegation of Guatemala would like to express its recognition for the adoption of the resolution of the 2026 program budget. This is the fruit of an open and respectful, constructive dialogue which reaffirms the commitment of member states with the financial sustainability and institutional effectiveness of our organization. We also would like to recognize the delegation of Costa Rica, the ambassador of Costa Rica, and her leadership at the helm of the CAP. We also thank Canada and Brazil for their support, for being vice chairs, as well as other delegations for the support of Guatemala as the 3rd vice chair of CAP with Carlos Bautista. President, the culmination of this process means that the strength of the OAS is in the capacity to come up with compromises when faced with difficult decisions. The decisions reached at CAP and the adoption of the program budget reflect a collective effort and to have a balance between mandates and limited resources. In that sense, Guatemala is happy to see measures to strengthen the culture of accountability, transparency, and responsible management. These are essential principles for good administration of resources and consolidate member states' trust in the General Secretariat. These values are the foundation of a more effective organization which is more aligned with the priorities in the hemisphere. The 2026 budget reaffirms the commitment of member states to the 4 essential pillars of the OAS: democracy, human rights, multidimensional security, and integral development. Guatemala appreciates that we have preserved the resources for the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, the IACHR, and the CIM, the Inter-American Institute of the Child, and also scholarships programs, which is important for human rights in the hemisphere. We celebrate the strengthening of key institutions such as the IADB and the Inter-American Defense College. President, the sustainability of the organization depends to a great extent to the shared responsibility in complying with financial obligations. We agree that it's important to have prompt payment of quotas and have responsible use of the reserve funds for budgetary stability. We also agree that we need to move forward to have an austere and disciplined financial framework so we can respond to hemispheric challenges. Lastly, Chair, we reaffirm our commitment to continue to constructively engaging in the follow-up of this 2026 program budget in order to optimize resources and to ensure its execution. Thank you very much, Guatemala. Now, St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Ambassador Jaquez, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. We gathered today at a special session of the OAS General Assembly, having approved the regular fund program budget for 2026. While special sessions are permitted under Articles 35 and 42 of the Rules of the General Assembly, we hope that future program budgets will be approved during regular sessions, as outlined in Article 112C of the OAS Charter and Chapter 6 of the General Standards. The recent reliance on special sessions, prompted by the presentation of the A&M report and the transition between the Almagro and Ramdin administrations, should remain an exception rather than be the norm. The delegation of St. Vincent and the Grenadines trusts that the language adopted in this resolution will ensure that future budgets are considered at regular sessions. Madam President, we recognize several positive developments in this year's budget negotiations for the 2026 regular fund program budget. Notable among these are provisions to address the situation in Haiti, the establishment of the Capital Fund for the Comprehensive Real Assets Strategy and its Governance Committee, the creation of the Office of the Executive Director, continued progress in implementing the A&M report, and support for the Leo S. Rowe Pan-American Fund's external audit costs. In spite of these developments, our delegation remains concerned, chiefly about the risk of micromanagement, which could undermine the operational autonomy necessary for effective governance. There is a delicate balance between accountability and oversight and excessive scrutiny, such as probing the Secretary General's and Assistant Secretary General's housing allowances, trust positions, and remuneration, risks crossing into micromanagement. We urge the Assembly to establish clear boundaries to maintain effective governance without undermining operational autonomy. Geographic representation remains a priority for our delegation. We commend the ongoing work on the geographic representation strategy, which aims to promote equity and attract nationals from underrepresented member states to the OAS. Madam President, we acknowledge the importance of the Inter-American human rights system and note the call for increased funding from the regular fund, rather than relying solely on specific funds. However, budgetary constraints persist. We recommend serious consideration of a dedicated capital fund to ensure sustainable financing for both the Inter-American Court and Commission on Human Rights, the success of the Leo S. Rowe Pan-American Fund, the Scholarship Capital Fund, and the Capital Fund for the Comprehensive Real Assets Strategy serve as valuable models. During negotiations, concerns arose regarding both the potential for political victimization of General Secretariat staff and the challenge of ensuring accountability in cases of misconduct. Striking a balance between staff rights and accountability is essential. We trust that this resolution will address these issues and that internal mechanisms will remain robust. Madam President, protecting the rights and well-being of staff must remain central to our budgetary decisions. Cost-saving measures should not compromise staff health or the interests of the people of the hemisphere. A zero nominal growth budget is not in the best interest of the organization. The recurring cycle of austerity, followed by budget increases, is unsustainable, often resulting in frozen or reduced staff and programs while mandates continue to expand. We advocate, therefore, for a more stable and predictable budgeting approach. Madam President, the pillars of integral development and multidimensional security are vital and interconnected. Our delegation is deeply concerned about periodic cuts and pressures on SEDI. All four pillars of the organization, human rights, democracy, integral development, and multidimensional security, are interdependent and equally important. Funding must be allocated fairly and proportionately to ensure the success of each pillar. Madam President, the delegation of St. Vincent and the Grenadines reaffirms the importance of the Organization of American States, even in the face of ongoing financial challenges and pressures on the multilateral system. We remain confident in the organization's resilience. We must not disappoint the people of the Americas by failing to uphold our commitments to democracy, integral development, human rights, and security. Let us remain focused. Let us persevere. Let us work together to implement this program budget and strive for even greater progress in the 2027 fiscal period. Madam President, I thank you.
I thank you, Ambassador. Muchas gracias. Y ahora le damos la palabra.
Thank you very much. St. Lucia, Ambassador, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. St. Lucia expresses its sincere appreciation to all delegations and to the leadership of the Committee on Administrative and Budgetary Affairs for the rigorous and at times challenging negotiations that have culminated in the draft program budget of the organization for 2026. This year's process has been characterized by an extraordinary need to balance competing imperatives. On one hand, to give effect to the priorities of the new Secretary General of the OAS and his vision for a more responsive and modern organization, and on the other, to contend with the stark fiscal realities of an institution constrained by chronic liquidity challenges and persistent arrears in quota payments. We have sought, therefore, a delicate equilibrium between ambition and affordability. We have attempted to preserve the operational viability of the General Secretariat while safeguarding the organization's credibility and effectiveness. These negotiations have not been easy. They have demanded compromise, realism, and an acute awareness that the OAS cannot be reformed through vision alone, but through the discipline of fiscal responsibility and the faithful observance of our collective commitments. The reality is that the organization continues to operate under severe liquidity constraints, and this has profound implications for its credibility and capacity to deliver on mandates. For St. Lucia, these negotiations have reaffirmed once again the centrality of the pillar of integral development. It remains the pillar through which the citizens of small and vulnerable states most tangibly experience the value of the OAS. This through scholarships and training, technical cooperation, support from MSMEs, youth development, and climate resilience initiatives. We therefore attach the highest importance to ensuring that the Executive Secretariat for Integral Development is adequately strengthened and resourced, and that its work continues to reflect the developmental priorities of the member states it serves, particularly those of the Caribbean and other developing states. We therefore believe that safeguarding the sustainability of this pillar is essential to ensuring that the OAS remains a partner for development, not merely a forum for debate. At the same time, St. Lucia recognizes that no budget, however balanced on paper, can be executed without the requisite cash flow. The organization continues to suffer from delayed quota payments that compromise its liquidity and disrupt program implementation. We therefore reaffirm our call for a recommitment to the Charter principles of solidarity, equity, and respect for international obligations, and support measures that encourage the timely and predictable payment of quotas as a shared duty of membership. We must safeguard the collective interests of all member states by ensuring that the organization can meet its mandates and obligations without crisis management becoming the norm. In closing, Madam President, St. Lucia reaffirms its commitment to the sustainability and integrity of this organization. The 2026 program budget should serve as both a fiscal plan and a statement of intent, one that balances reform with responsibility, innovation with inclusion, and aspiration with prudence. We remain hopeful that through continued collaboration and mutual respect, the OAS will emerge more resilient, more relevant, and better equipped to serve the peoples of the Americas. I thank you.
I thank you, Ambassador. And now le damos la palabra al señor
Roger Isaura from Honduras, you have the floor. Thank you very much, President. The delegation of Honduras would like to express its sincere recognition of Ambassador Solano, a permanent representative of Costa Rica, for her able stewardship of CAP, and the vice chairs, as well as member states that participated very actively in developing the 2026 program budget. We appreciate the spirit of consensus and arduous efforts made. It reflects the collective effort of member states and their commitment to institutional responsibility and transparency. We reiterate our commitment to the OAS with the strengthening of its 4 pillars: democracy, human rights, integral development, and multidimensional security, as well as the promotion of responsible management that allows the OAS to comply with its mandates in the benefit of all peoples of the Americas. The government of Honduras, under President Xiomara Castro, reaffirms its commitment to constructively work with other member states to strengthen multilateralism, promote dialogue, and consolidate a more equitable, inclusive, and fair hemisphere. We want to underscore the importance of the program budget process because it shows a shared vision and co-responsibility. This is essential so that the OAS can comply with its mandates effectively in the benefit of the peoples of the Americas. Thank you. Thank you very much for your words. The Ambassador Henry Martin of St. Kitts and Nevis, you have the floor, madam.
Madam Chair, Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, Secretary General Ramdin, Assistant Secretary General Hill, OAS professionals, the delegation of St. Kitts and Nevis thanks the Chair and the Secretariat for their tireless efforts in guiding member states through this complex process. We are mindful that every line in this budget carries with it not only figures, but principles that should determine how effectively the OAS serves the peoples of the Americas. It is important, notwithstanding, to place some observations on the table. In years past, budget deliberations were marked by civility and informed good faith. They were, for the most part, nonpartisan in tone and balanced in intent, reflecting the understanding that financial stewardship is not an arena for contest, but a commitment to common purpose. This year, the spirit of deliberation that once guided us towards consensus too often gave way to division, overreach, and an unprecedented inclination towards micromanagement of executive decisions on operational matters. This is the view of the delegation of St. Kitts and Nevis. My delegation believes that the OAS must never become a space where power plays eclipse partnership, or where influence overrides integrous procedural deliberation. The fiscal health of this organization demands clarity, transparency, and above all, respectful negotiation and dialogue. Article 3 of the Charter of the Organization of American States reminds us that the American states are juridically equal, enjoy equal rights, and have equal obligations. This is not a ceremonial phrase. It is a moral and legal foundation. Regardless of size or economic power, every member state must have an equal voice in shaping the destiny of this organization. When any process, particularly one as vital as the budget, reflects imbalance, undue constraint, or coercion, it undermines the equality that the Charter so clearly upholds. St. Kitts and Nevis therefore expresses its firm view that our negotiations, however passionate, must always remain rooted in objectivity and in the conviction that this is a house of equals, not an arena of dominance. The 2026 program budget reminds us that the 4 pillars of our organization binds this hemispheric, the 4 pillars of our organization bind this hemispheric family, and that because these pillars are interdependent, to weaken one is to weaken them all. Democracy must be more than a word. It must be protected through institutions that function and elections that inspire trust. Human rights must be safeguarded not only across our nations, but within our own organization, ensuring dignity and fairness for every member of its personnel. Multidimensional security must remain a shared responsibility because the threats that destabilize one nation inevitably affect us all. And integral development, the pillar closest to the heart of all of our states, including our small developing states, because it is about people, potential, human development, and sustainability of natural resources, must be fully respected. The people of the Americas will not accept an organization that diminishes their prospects through neglect, marginalization, grandstanding, or inequity. Our charter, and indeed our conscience, must oblige us to practice within these walls what we preach beyond them: transparency, accountability, equity, and justice. An organization that advocates for rights and fairness in the hemisphere must embody those same values internally, in its governance, in its staffing, and in the prudent management of the resources entrusted to it. Madam Chair, St. Kitts and Nevis looks to 2026 as a year of recommitment and reinvigoration, a year when all member states, large and small, honor their quota obligations, and when we work not in competition, but in cooperation to strengthen the OAS as a beacon of democracy, development, rights, and security. In accepting and supporting the outcome of budget negotiations, my delegation admits that while this has been a difficult negotiation and an unusually incoherent at times process, we are here to work together to restore the trust, respect, and balance that have long defined the nobility of this organization. Let 2026, therefore, be remembered as the year the OAS reclaimed its unity of purpose and stood once again as a true instrument of service to the peoples of our Americas. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, embajador.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for that message. The floor now goes to the alternate representative of the United States.
The budget negotiations that we, the member states, have engaged in over the last few weeks are not just about numbers. It is about working together to align priorities and ensure that every decision supports the shared goals of this organization and the peoples of the Americas. It is well known that this OAS is operating with an austerity budget, which requires making difficult choices and identifying inefficiencies. This reality calls on us here to be strategic, to focus on our highest priorities, eliminate redundancies, and ensure that every dollar spent delivers measurable impact to our region. The United States recognizes the challenge that this type of budget introduces for Secretary General Ramdin as he begins his tenure. We also acknowledge the efforts made by every delegation in this room to consider ways to identify savings and to build consensus. This includes the consideration of the Secretary General's proposed budget and the identification of resources to support his vision, while also ensuring that this organization remains focused on its core mandates and makes the most of its available resources. Earlier this year at the General Assembly in Antigua and Barbuda, Deputy Secretary Landau stated that this is not a time for mere words and slogans about hemispheric solidarity. It's time for the OAS to show results. This statement continues to hold true, and the program budget adopted today is a call to action because the value of a budget isn't in the document itself. It lies in what we deliver with it. Every dollar allocated must be traceable to a tangible outcome or impact. For the United States, the implementation of this budget is more than just financial stewardship. It is about maximizing value and ensuring that resources, including American taxpayer dollars, are used efficiently, transparently, and with measurable impact. Our goal is to see a culture of continuous improvement where impactful investments, wise allocation of resources, and the seeking of savings are central to how this organization operates. Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. Now we give the floor to Vanessa Ramheed from Trinidad and Tobago.
Chair, Excellencies, Secretary General Ramdin, Assistant Secretary General Hill, delegates, ladies and gentlemen. The convening of today's special session to consider the organization's budget for 2026 demonstrates our joint commitment to the OAS as one of the hemisphere's important multilateral institutions, widely recognized for having a positive impact on all our societies. While the negotiations were indeed tedious, lengthy, and complex, adoption of the 2026 program budget reflects the collective commitment of member states to uphold the organization's mandates while embracing fiscal discipline and sustainability. We can all agree that this was no easy task. Yet, member states have demonstrated that even after nearly 80 years, the will for a strong and functioning OAS has not waned. It is Trinidad and Tobago's view that the OAS Secretary General and Assistant Secretary General should be provided with the necessary tools to navigate this period of austerity with clarity, resilience, and strategic foresight. In this regard, Trinidad and Tobago supports the Secretary General's approach to seeking alternative and innovative financial streams to supplement the OAS's diminishing and inadequate budgets. Furthermore, we continue to call for enhanced engagement with permanent observer states as strategic and meaningful partners and look forward to exploring new avenues for collaboration with international organizations and the private sector, as well as grant funding to diversify the organization's revenue streams. In so doing, we can enhance our financial resilience and ensure that the OAS continues to serve as a platform for dialogue, cooperation, and progress in the Americas with programs that yield tangible benefits for our people. Chair, Trinidad and Tobago takes the opportunity at this special session to highlight that equitable geographical representation and gender parity remain two important areas for which we will continue to advocate. It is our view that the OAS should be representative of all its members. Further, we encourage the strengthening of the pillars of security and development, both of which are especially vital in a hemisphere that is increasingly marked by growing inequalities and escalating security challenges. These areas are critical to the advancement of the hemisphere as a whole. At this juncture, Chair, my delegation wishes to commend the recognition of the importance of supporting Haiti's development and stability in the 2026 program budget. Chair, Trinidad and Tobago reaffirms its unwavering commitment to the principles of multilateralism and to the Organization of American States. We remain steadfast in our collective pursuit for a safe, prosperous, democratic, and inclusive Americas. I thank you.
Thank you, Trinidad and Tobago, and le damos la palabra.
Now we give the floor to the ambassador from Colombia. Thank you, Madam Chair. Congratulations on your impeccable stewardship of this General Assembly. I'm sure that all you do will be a success. So I would like to echo all the words of encouragement. Colombia applauds the adoption of the 2026 program budget for the organization. The text is the result of arduous and dedicated work within the CAP under your leadership. I would like to highlight, as so many have done, Ambassador Alejandra Solano's stewardship of this process as chair of the CAP, and also my thanks go to Canada, Brazil, and Guatemala, the vice chairs. I'd like to publicly express thanks to Nicolas Higuera, delegate of Colombia to the CAP, whose dedication and professionalism helped bring us to a successful conclusion today. What we've achieved today demonstrates our ability to build consensus and work together jointly even when we have different perspectives. This agreement will enable the organization to continue its work, but also reaffirms our shared responsibility and toward the institutional strengthening of the OAS and the fulfillment of its mandate. Colombia is convinced that this budget will enable more efficient use of the organization's resources by identifying savings and strengthening areas that required greater financial support and closer engagement by the states. We've taken a step forward, and we will continue to work to strengthen the Organization of American States to the benefit of the hemisphere. I reiterate our call to the states to continue addressing matters effectively and efficiently so that the organization be adapted to the needs of our region and be relevant to our peoples. Madam President, Colombia wishes to reiterate that, as we have stated previously, the interpretation of the OAS Charter should be done comprehensively and not choosing fragments as convenient. I say this because Article 113, which gives powers to the Secretary General, also at the end says that the Secretary General will exercise these powers in accordance with the general standards and budget provisions as established by the General Assembly. We therefore reiterate our call to bear in mind these powers in terms of budget management, that they are not full powers and that they fall within the framework of discussions of the General Assembly. In that regard, although we have agreed to remove a paragraph in this meeting, it's clear that the Secretary General must work in a manner consistent with the 2026 program budget adopted today, and we are confident that he will, respecting at all times the OAS Charter in its entirety and striking a balance between the organization's pillars and budgetary matters. It is vital that we continue to work together toward efficiency and transparency in resource execution and ensure that with the support of the Secretary General and the Assistant Secretary General and all of the staff, that we will fully move forward with the mandates in the resolution. I'd like to highlight that adoption of this program budget is more than just a financial matter. It is a political sign of full support for the Secretary General and a strategic vision for the hemisphere, a vision that is fully aligned with the basic priorities of the states represented here today. The budget is a tangible basis upon which we will build real transformative solutions for current challenges. The true challenge is to ensure that every dollar is spent in an optimal, responsible way so that our organization can be an inspiration and provides opportunities for all. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ambassador. The distinguished ambassador from Canada, Stuart Savage, has the floor. Please go ahead.
Thank you, President, Secretary General, Assistant Secretary General, dear colleagues. On the occasion of this 58th special session of the General Assembly, Canada would like to congratulate CAP for their arduous work and their exemplary work. And we want to underscore the leadership of the chair of CAP and the president of this General Assembly, Ambassador Alejandra Solano. She has directed our negotiations with professionalism during a very difficult period. Similarly, we would like to recognize the technical secretary of CAP, Ileana Navarro, the team of the General Secretariat, for their dedication, their assistance, and their historical memory also has been so important. Madam President, the grave financial situation of the OAS is the worst in its history. Canada reiterates its support of the Secretary General and the Assistant Secretary General in their efforts to modernize the OAS and align resources with mandates in a sustainable way. A effective, strong, and effective General Secretariat is key so that the OAS can protect democracy, governance, human rights, and also the quality of life, equality between men and women, multidimensional security, and integral development throughout the hemisphere.
Pleased with the early progress made towards organizational reform, particularly the establishment of the Office of Executive Director and Chief Risk Officer. These advances reflect long-standing recommendations for improved organizational governance and risk oversight. Canada thanks the Secretary General for his budget proposal and his identification of 10% savings. We are grateful for the collaboration and collaborative spirit through which member states agreed on measures that ensure the organization's core functions remain intact while advancing prudent financial management. Our collective efforts protect such essential functions as the Inter-American Commission of Women, the Inter-American Court and the Inter-American Commission of Human Rights, and the Inter-American Children's Institute, among others. These are vital institutions that advance the values and priorities of the Inter-American system. Indeed, to many citizens, they represent the Inter-American system. Canada is satisfied that many of the Secretary General's proposals have been incorporated into the final budget proposal adopted by member states, while also agreeing to a zero nominal growth budget. Support for Haiti has been reflected through the establishment of a special representative, as well as mobilizing the necessary resources to convene REMJA meetings. These meetings will focus on combating corruption and strengthening justice reform in Haiti, in alignment with the Secretary General's roadmap for that country. Canada also appreciates our continued collective shared commitment to equitable geographic representation and gender equality within the OAS Secretariat. Challenges remain, however, particularly regarding the long overdue completion of OAS core, while after significant investments have yet to yield the expected results. Canada will continue to support the Secretariat's leadership through the CAP in advancing reforms, enhancing management practices, transparency, and accountability. Reform undertaken following last year's third-party external review are essential steps towards that goal and must continue. These efforts will help ensure that the OAS remains a credible and sustainable institution into the future. It is imperative that the OAS continue along the path of prudent budgetary discipline while also diversifying its sources of funding and addressing liquidity concerns. My delegation would welcome an update on those efforts from the Secretary General at the appropriate time. Canada commends member states for having maintained timely payment of their assessed contributions, and we urge all member states in arrears to make good on their obligations and commitments to the organization. Canada encourages all efforts, such as we've debated in the course of this discussion today, to find a better way forward on this fundamental matter. Finally, we again thank all member states for their collaboration and the General Secretariat for its continued professionalism and support. In particular, we would like to express our sincere appreciation to the distinguished delegate of Colombia, Mr. Nicolas Higuera, who went above and beyond the call of duty. His exemplary efforts and leadership were instrumental in facilitating a clear understanding amongst member states of budget figures. Madam Chair, Canada remains committed to working with all member states to pursue our shared interest in a sustainable financial future for the OAS, including through adopting further institutional and modern management practices to allow it to continue to effectively serve the peoples of the Americas. Thank you. Merci. Obrigado. Gracias.
Merci, Monsieur el Embajador. Y ahora le damos la palabra.
Thank you, and now we give the floor to the Ambassador of Guyana. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam President, Secretary General, Assistant Secretary General, heads of delegation. Over the past weeks, we have been deeply engaged in fashioning our 2026 budget. No doubt, we are all breathing sighs of relief now that we have an accepted budget. The Guyana delegation thanks the Secretary General in this year of administrative change for proposing a reworked budget in a relatively short period of time. We also offer our thanks to Ambassador Solano, the chair of the CAP, the vice chairs of the CAP, Ms. Eliana Navarro, secretary to the CAP, and to the Office of the Executive Director for their efforts in seeing us through this process. As in previous years, and in keeping with principles of transparency, the budget proposal has been subject to much and varied scrutiny. My delegation acknowledges that for the Secretary General and General Secretariat to perform their duties and responsibilities, they must be properly equipped with the resources and tools to do so. This requires the careful consideration and support of member states to ensure consistency, stability, and financial viability of the organization. My delegation, therefore, remains concerned about the organization's financial situation and the impact of late payment of quotas. We have placed enormous responsibility in the OAS and the specialized organizations, and we should provide them with adequate resources to satisfy those responsibilities. We are aware of and respect the fact that states face varying political, social, and economic challenges in uncertain times and have different interests and priorities as reflected in the budget negotiation process. It strikes us, however, that in considering the program budget, there is need for balance that allows the member states the transparency and accountability they require, whilst at the same time affording the Secretary General, within the parameters of the OAS Charter and general standards, the resources and the independence to take forward the mandates that he has been entrusted with and his vision for delivery under our 4 pillars
democracy, human rights, multidimensional security, and integral development. It is not always possible to do more with less. We know that the OAS is undertaking critical work for the peoples of the Americas, and as a small state, Guyana upholds and emphasizes the need for this organization, this hemispheric multilateral forum that offers opportunities to share experiences, help each other, and to find points of convergence, and to discuss, resolve, reconcile points of contention. Madam President, in whatever the circumstances, we must do the best that we can. And it is with this spirit that Guyana celebrates our now approved 2026 budget. It is our hope that we can find ways to advance the various priorities without detriment to any. We welcome the Secretary General's focus on Haiti and look forward to receiving the policy on national offices of our OAS. There's much work ahead, and to move forward, we must do so in the spirit of cooperation and collaboration. There will be difficult issues flagged by Antigua and Barbuda, and also the Bahamas. These issues will not disappear. We can anticipate difficult conversations ahead, but I think with today's passing of our budget, we should be ready to face them. I thank you very much, Madam President.
We thank you, Ambassador Hines, and now I give the floor to our...
Ahora le doy la palabra a... Now give the floor to Haiti.
Thank you, President. Madam President, Secretary General, Assistant Secretary General, the delegation of Haiti welcomes the adoption of this program budget for the year 2026. We would also like to congratulate all member states who have worked at CAP and who have been able to reach a consensus in order to adopt this program budget. We also welcome, Madam President, your leadership, and we thank you for leading the CAP. Your work has then led to this special General Assembly. We would also like to thank Secretary General Albert Ramdin for his special attention that he has kindly given to my country, Haiti. Despite the lack of resources at this organization, the Secretary General is making great efforts to come to our aid. The preservation of allocations to Haiti is a sign that we appreciate and value. Similarly, we support the Secretary General and his proposal to have a trust position for someone to pay specific and exclusive attention to the crisis in Haiti. This budget is not perfect, of course, but the allocations for important programs that are priorities for the organization reflect our sense of responsibility, which prevails here. Madam President, I would like to conclude my statement by stating that my country has the most fragile economy of any state here. Nevertheless, we try to promptly pay our quotas. President, if we are in arrears of our payments, we nevertheless are making efforts to pay, and we want everyone to make this effort to make good on their payments. To the extent that I know, the OAS needs us. We can only count on the contributions of every member state because the OAS does not play the lottery. And so we urge all member states to undertake their financial responsibilities so that we can support the vision of our Secretary General of the organization for our hemisphere. Thank you. Thank you very much, dear colleague.
Solicitudes del uso.
There being no further requests for the floor, and as we've exhausted all items in the order of the day, we'll proceed to continue with the closing session of the 58th special session of the General Assembly. We just need to very quickly close this or adjourn this session and move directly to the closing session. So patience. This session is adjourned. Now, immediately, I now call to order the closing session of the 58th special session of the General Assembly, and I now give the floor to the Secretary General of the organization, Mr. Albert Ramdeen, so that he may address this assembly.
President of the 58th Special General Assembly, I take the floor in closing only to say this, to express our appreciation on behalf of the General Secretary to you, as not only President of this General Assembly, but also as Chairperson of CAP, and of course to your team of Vice Presidents for the work done to have today adopted the 26 budget. Thank you very much for your efforts. I know it has not been an easy task. And as per our tradition, and to recognize your leadership,
Thank you, sir.
we would like to hand over to you the customary flags of the OAS. And with that, it's coming here.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for your efforts.
Thank you, sir. Muchísimas gracias al señor.
Thank you very much to the Secretary General for his acknowledgments. As President of the 58th Special Session of the General Assembly, I wish to express my deepest thanks for the collaboration and constructive spirit that have characterized all our deliberations, today being no exception. The remarks from the delegations once again reflected the member states' firm commitment to institutionally strengthening our organization and to building consensus to find harmony amongst our national priorities while seeking the collective interest of the hemisphere. The budget that we've adopted today not only ensures the operational continuity of the OAS, but reaffirms its essential purpose to serve the people of the Americas responsibly, transparently, and via tangible results. This exercise has enabled us to show that even in times of constraints, political will and dialogue are capable of leading to sound, sustainable agreements. We thus conclude a most demanding process, yet one that has been deeply valuable and that leaves its legacy a more cohesive, more efficient, and better prepared organization in terms of addressing the challenges of the future. To each and every delegation, my sincerest thanks for your commitment, your willingness to engage in dialogue, and your trust in this collective process. I offer my special thanks also to the General Secretariat, Secretary General Albert Ramdin, the whole technical support team, conference services, the interpretation team that have helped us, all of whose professionalism, dedication made it possible to successfully conduct this session and those that preceded it. In this spirit of cooperation and shared purpose, I formally adjourn the 58th special session of the General Assembly of the Organization of American States, now at 5:30 p.m., October 15th, 2025. Session adjourned.